used to dwell in a house among his people, but now he has a home that's better than the first. It doesn't look like a building with a steeple. Now he's living in the people of the church. Brick after brick, God is building his temple. Brick after brick, he's making it strong. With Christ the sure foundation and his people as the stones, he is building a place he can live. Brick after brick.
I want to call your attention to the Word of God found in the book of Acts, chapter 27, and I'm reading from the King James Version this morning, and beginning at verse 9. Now when much time was spent, and when sailing was now dangerous, because the fast was now already past, Paul admonished them and said unto them, Sirs, I perceive that this voyage will be with hurt and much damage, not only of the lading and ship, but also of our lives. Nevertheless, the centurion believed the master and the owner of the ship more than those things which were spoken by Paul. But not long after there arose against it a tempest wind called Euroclydon. And when the ship was caught and could not bear up into the wind, we let her drive. And running under a certain island, which is called Clauda, we had much work to come by the boat, which when we had taken up, they used helps undergirding the ship, and fearing lest they should fall into the quicksands, strike sail, and so were driven. And we being exceedingly tossed with the tempest, the next day they lightened the ship. And on the third day we cast out with our own hands the tacklings of the ship. And when neither sun nor stars in many days appeared, and no small tempest lay on us, all hope that we would be saved was then taken away. But after a long abstinence, Paul stood forth in the midst of them and said, Sirs, ye should have hearkened unto me, and not have loosened from Crete, and to have gained this harm and loss. And now I exhort you to be of good cheer, for there shall be no loss of any man's life among you, but of the ship. For there stood by me this night the angel of God, whose I am, and whom I serve, saying, Fear not, Paul, thou must be brought before Caesar. And lo, God hath given thee all them that sail with thee. Wherefore, sirs, be of good cheer, for I believe God, and it shall be even as it was told me. Verse 25, Wherefore, sirs, be of good cheer, for I believe God, that it shall be even as it was told me. Be of good cheer. My subject this morning is good cheer in a bad storm. Good cheer in a bad storm. Over my years of preaching, I have preached out of this chapter more than any other. For some reason, the Lord has always brought me back to this story. Even here at the Brick, we have shared several messages out of this story. It's a lengthy chapter, and it speaks about a storm. And it was a devastating storm. And it's a story about supernatural deliverance. There was a miraculous deliverance given to Paul and everyone else on that boat. We know that it was supernatural because it tells us, there stood by me this night the angel of God, whose I am and whom I serve, saying, fear not, Paul, for thou must be brought before Caesar, and lo, God has given thee all them that sail with thee. An angel of God told Paul that he's going to be saved, that he's going to survive this. Not only him, but all that were with him. And his response, wherefore, sirs, and there's that phrase, be of good cheer, for I believe God. Now, if this is a supernatural deliverance, it's not what we think of when we think of a miracle. When we read through the New Testament and other portions of the Bible, the miracles of Jesus, what do we see when we see the hand of God healing people? When blind eyes are opened, cripples are raised up. Jesus miraculously turned water into wine, and he calls someone from the grave and brings them back to life. Those are the images that we have when we think about a miracle. That's what that looks like. That's what we envision. That's what we expect when we say God has healed, God has delivered, God gave us a miracle. We don't think this. And yet, this was how that miracle looked. We don't think that a supernatural deliverance, a message sent by an angel that God was going to save, would end looking like this. No one would come into the church with a picture like this and stand up and say, this is what God did for me. It's not what we expect when we think about miracles. They're in a sea storm, and the Bible actually has several stories about storms at sea. The sea was very dangerous to the ancient world. It's very unpredictable. It was a constant threat to the ancient world. And so it is not really surprising that we see several stories about people that are caught in the storms. Go back to the famous story of Jonah, which takes place when his ship is caught in a storm. Jesus walks on the water during a storm at sea. It's at that time he performs another miracle, as if that wasn't enough, and allows Peter to come out. On another occasion, they are once again caught in a storm. Jesus is asleep. They awake him, and he gets up and yells, "Peace, be still," and miraculously calms the storm. And that's an interesting story, and I'd like to take a peek at that right now. It's found in the Gospel of Mark, the 4th chapter. And a great windstorm arose, and the waves beat into the boat so that it was already filling. But he, Jesus, was in the stern, asleep on a pillow. They awoke him and said to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" Isn't it funny that when we get in trouble, the first question we have is, do you care? Don't you love us? Why aren't you helping us? It's interesting that they didn't say, can't you do anything about this? They weren't doubting his power. It was doubting his love. Don't you care? Aren't you listening? Doesn't it mean anything to you that I'm hurting? Then he arose and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, peace, be still. And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. While this storm was going on, it says Jesus was in the stern asleep. The same storm that they were panicking over, the same storm that they were experiencing, Jesus was sleeping. He was in that same storm. He arose and says, peace, be still. The peace that was in him was greater than the storm outside of him. You can't give what you don't have. He had the peace of God in him, so that the storm didn't have the same effect on him as it did everybody else. So here we have Paul in a storm. And we don't see Jesus walking on the water. We don't see Jesus saying, peace, be still. We see the ship crashing. Now, this wasn't the only storm that Paul was in. We read on an occasion, 3 times I have been beaten with rods. Once I was stoned. 3 times I have been shipwrecked. A night and day I have been adrift at sea. So this clearly wasn't the only storm that Paul had been in. But this one was a particularly strong and dangerous storm. No doubt a hurricane at sea. Now, we've all experienced hurricanes on some level or another. Where we live geographically, we don't get the intense hurricanes that other parts of the country get, but we have had our share. However small of a category, we have had them. I was here when one hit Rhode Island, and literally the eye of the storm went over Rhode Island. And when we're in a hurricane, it's a bad day. And more specifically, it's a bad couple of hours. The one that hit us in New England, the brunt of the storm was 2 hours, and then the eye covered, and then it was another 2 hours after before the storm went through. Now, understand the devastation of a storm can have a lingering effect for days and weeks, months. But the storm itself is usually in a matter of a day or even a few hours. And I know there are exceptions to that. But for the most part, it's getting through those rough hours. But at sea, it has to be all the more intense. And in this storm, it tells us just before dawn, Paul urged them to eat. For the last 14 days, he said, you have been in constant suspense and had gone without food and have not eaten anything. This storm that they were in went on for at least 14 days. This wasn't a bad day. This was a very devastating, dangerous storm. And it says they had at this point just given up hope of making it through. And in this storm, when Paul finally gets up he says something that some will see as quite bizarre. He says, be of good cheer. Some translations render it, take courage. Other translations say, take heart. But several translations, such as the King James, say, be of good cheer. And there are even other translations that say, cheer up. Now, understand, they're in the storm of their life. Cheer up. It's not, don't be afraid. It's not, get a hold of yourself. It's cheer up. It would seem a bizarre thing to say under these circumstances. Is this a time to be cheerful? Be of good cheer is actually a phrase that Jesus used on a couple of occasions. And it's interesting to see when he chose to use that language. One of the times he said it was the last night of his life. He is with the apostles, telling them, this is it. I'm going to be betrayed. You are going to deny me. You're all going to flee. And I'm going to be tortured and murdered by the Romans. We read in John's Gospel, a little while and you will not see me. And again, a little while and you will see me, because I go to the Father. This is devastating news. These things I have spoken to you, that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. The worst night of their lives. And his message to them is be cheerful. He used that phrase on another occasion. It happened to be in a sea storm when he walked on the water. And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, it is a ghost, and they cried out for fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, be of good cheer. It is I. Do not be afraid. So the similarity in these stories is you have the absolute worst case scenario, and the message is be of good cheer. Cheer up. Now, cheer is not one of our usual language. It's not something we say all the time, but we do have occasions when we use the word cheers. Oftentimes, it's with toasting. We cheers. We use it when we say 3 cheers, hip, hip, hooray. We know what that looks like. We know what that means when it says 3 cheers. We have cheerleaders, people that will enhance and encourage you to be cheerful. And when the cheerleader comes out, he wants you to do more than clap. He wants you to make some noise. Get on your feet and yell. That's what cheering means. And here the message is, be cheerful. As we deal with this issue that's hitting our nation and our world, we talk about not panicking, staying calm. Don't go overboard. And all of those are good, sound advice. But I'm here to tell you there's another message for the people of God. It's good that our communities and societies, it's important that they not panic. But for the church, we need to be cheerful. We need to be joyful, even at this time. Why would we be cheerful? What is there to be cheerful about? Well, the answer is clear in these stories. Be cheerful because it's me, because I'm here. The only thing that would warrant cheerfulness in any of these stories is the fact that God is right here in the midst, that God's presence is right here. And no matter what you're going through, no matter what comes our way, if we believe that God is still in the number, then we have something to be joyful about. It's good that people will say, well, I come to church, I'm here, I'm not panicking. But the bigger question is, are you cheerful? Do you have the joy of the Lord? Because let me tell you, as this thing unfolds, anything that steals your praise will rob you of your victory. And there is a victory that is unique and special to the people of God, because we have learned the secret, the mystery. I will bless the Lord at all times. His praise shall continually be in my mouth. It doesn't matter what is going on. It doesn't matter what the world is facing. James puts it this way, dear brothers and sisters, when troubles of any kind come your way, consider it an opportunity for great joy. I don't know what is going to unfold. I don't know what is going to come our way. I don't know who is going to become sick, who is going to take financial hits, who is going to be grief-stricken by loss. But one thing I could tell you, that God says, I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. No matter what happens, no matter what comes your way, you can know that I'm still here. And though things may look dark, and though things may look scary, you can be joyful knowing that God is still here and he will never leave you. No matter how hard the storm hits, no matter what comes our way, if sickness comes our way, if finances come our way, God is still here. And as long as he is here, I will lift my hands. I will bless the Lord. I will clap my hands and say, thank you, Jesus. I will praise you on the mountaintop. I'll praise you down in the valley. I won't let anything steal my praise. I won't let anything steal my joy. He's my cheer in the time of storm.
Brick after brick, God is building his temple. Brick after brick, he is making it strong. With Christ the sure foundation and his people as the stones, he is building a place he can